Yeah, all right. So this is Time to Waste by Alkaline Trio. Okay, so I took a little bit of artistic freedom on this. This is not exactly how the intro goes, but it definitely gives the idea of it. So I really like this because it gives, this is going to be a really good representation of how to connect triads, which are chords, and why they work. So the entire intro is going back and forth between two chords the whole time. It's going between an F sharp minor and a D major. And in fact, there's a couple of different elements here that show you the similarities between these chords, which is kind of fun. So first off, you just have this basic melody. And the second half is essentially the same thing, but changing the C sharp to a D. And what's nice about that is that transition of going from a C sharp to a D is a representation of the difference between the two chords that are being played. So F sharp minor is F sharp A C sharp, and D major is D F sharp A. So what ends up showing here is that there's actually only one note difference between those two chords. This happens all the time in music where you have what is essentially a key of music, and several chords within that key actually share notes, and that's why they work so well and move so well together. So all that was happening there is just this constant climbing. And in the intro, it's just playing off of the notes within those chords. So you even heard me doing there at the end this big arpeggio. Sounds really fancy. All I'm doing is climbing down a D major chord. There it is at the highest end. And obviously it gives that really cool effect, and then we end on that F sharp minor. But yeah, that's a short little breakdown of the intro of Time to Waste by Alkaline Trio. All right, this song is called The Merry-Go-Round of Life. This is from Howl's Moving Castle, and the song is by Joe Hisaishi. I think that's how you pronounce it. Wow, this is a really pretty piece of music, and it's got a lot of variety going on here, so there's quite a lot to break down. I'm really excited about the intro to this piece because it's moving in a structure that I haven't actually spoken about in any of my breakdowns before, so this is kind of cool. This isn't really built off of a particular key in the beginning. It's more of an interval concept, and an interval has to do with the distance between notes. So after our little opening here, this line right here we've got these 4 different groupings of triplets, and what happens there, plus the roll that happens afterwards, where we go like this is all related. What's happening here is I'm not actually going down what's called a particular chord. This is actually moving in what are called perfect fourths. When we talk about perfect intervals, they refer to, there's three different types of a perfect interval. You have what's called an octave, or also known as a perfect eighth. Then you have what's called a perfect fifth, and then there's a perfect fourth. And the eighth, or the octave, just has to do with the fact that it's 8 notes apart. So an octave is just from one note to where it occurs again in either direction. Now, a fourth or a fifth, these are kind of interesting because a fifth, if we think about this in terms of half steps, this is a fifth, and a perfect fifth is 7 half steps away. Now, what's interesting about fifths is there is a connection between fifths and fourths in that if I go up 7 half steps, that's a fifth. Now, so from C to G, that's a fifth, but if I go from C to G downwards, that's a fourth. And a fourth is 5 half steps. So this little walk down in the beginning, all of my notes are perfect fourths or 5 half steps apart, which gives it a very interesting, unsettling, but pretty feel. I like that a lot. It's really, really cool effect. Then we get into the melody. And this beginning part is in G minor. We start out with the chord progression being a C minor 7, and then a walk up to a G minor. Now the next part, it goes back to that C minor 7, but this time instead of going to the G minor, it goes to an F7. An F7, or F dominant 7, is the dominant chord of B flat, which is where we go. But it's played in this really pretty major 7 chord. It sounds really, really sweet with that added A. Then we get into something quite interesting. This chord right here. Now this is what is called a half diminished 7. So that means that we have a diminished triad, and the 7th that we have, the note that is 7 notes away, is what's called a minor 7. So it means it is from the octave, which we talked about perfect eighths earlier, is 2 half steps below. But what's nice about this is that it resolves walking downward to a fully diminished 7, which is this note right here. And then to a D minor. Then we have an F, B flat. This is where things get interesting. We go from a B flat major to an A major to D major. Such a cool transition. And then we have that. And that gives it this interesting feel with this B flat here being on this D major. It's a reminiscent of the key that we came out of, which is G minor. And the significance of D major in G minor is that it's the dominant chord. So it's the 5 of G. So it's just such a cool effect. Then we get into the waltz pattern. And here we're actually going into B flat major for a little stint. And it's going back and forth between F major and B flat. And F is the 5 of B flat, so that makes sense. And then after that, we go into a minor section of the same waltz pattern, and it goes into D minor. And it's going between a D minor and an A major. And so we just keep, each section has a different layer of harmonic quality where we aren't settled in the same thing the whole time. It's so nice. But then, so we go between D minor and A is the dominant of D. So we're just keep changing keys. It keeps modulating. And then it just hangs out on that A. And that part's actually played by oboes. Very, very pretty. I definitely recommend listening to the actual version of this. It's the opening song from Howl's Moving Castle. Again, it's called Merry-Go-Round of Life, and it's by Joe Hisaishi.